Zach Carter of the Huffington Post has an amazing article out that shows how the big banks are getting ridiculous and they're just overreaching. And they keep overreaching. So this is crazy even for them. So he says the following: big banks get a lot of free money from the federal government, and their lobbyists now think they have a constitutional right to it. Each year, the government pays billions of dollars to banks to thank them for being part of the Federal Reserve System. These payments aren't structured to influence or encourage any particular business activity. Banks just get straight cash, no matter what they do. The subsidy is economically useless. It doesn't push interest rates lower or boost pay for bank tellers or help more farmers qualify for loans. The money just goes straight to the bottom line, boosting bank profits. He continues, Congress passed a law limiting these payouts, using the savings to help pay for a highway bill. While lawmakers originally proposed trimming the subsidy by $17 billion over 5 years, the legislation ultimately only cost banks $2.7 billion. Because, of course, so many senators behind the scenes, so many congressmen are fighting for the banks. So they wanted to trim $17 billion, and it became only $2.7 billion. They say the top lobbyist for the American Bankers Association wrote a letter to the Fed last week calling the subsidy cuts an unconstitutional taking of member banks' property without compensation. The government actions amount to a regulatory taking of member banks' property. All right, so you need to fully understand what's happening here. The big banks are literally arguing that they have a constitutional right to free money. These are the biggest welfare queens ever. The actual right-wing stereotype of poor welfare queens, they got nothing on these guys. Like, think about it. What would an actual welfare queen, the poor welfare queen, what do they want? Give me $1.30 a meal in the form of food stamps to pay for food for my kid. Ooh, how immoral. What a lazy person you are. The big banks? They're like, no, here's what's going to happen. Middle-class taxpayers in America are going to give us billions of dollars. Then if you try to cut that a little bit to fund highways, we're going to sue you, and we're going to say, wrong, we have a constitutional right to middle-class taxpayer money. So they want a constitutional right to free money. They want a right to be welfare queens. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Look, if you're somebody who's a Republican, if you're a right-wing figure, something like that, don't you ever talk about the lazy, parasitic moochers who don't want to work and they want everything handed to them unless you first and foremost talk about the big banks and people on Wall Street. Guess what? Just because they're white guys, mostly, wearing suits and ties doesn't mean that they ain't the fucking problem. They're not the smartest guys in the room. They're the most well-connected guys in the room. So when you pay your bribes to Congress, guess what? They're going to give you what you want. And this is why they get bailed out when small businesses don't get bailed out. This is why they get away with committing crimes. And in the rare instances where Congress is like, okay, look, out of necessity, we're going to cut a little bit because we got to fund this highway bill. So what are we going to do? They wanted to cut $17 billion. The banks were like, no! So they whittled them all the way down to $2 billion. We're only going to cut like $2 billion. We're only going to cut like $2 billion. No! And then what do? They cry. We have a constitutional right to free money from the middle-class taxpayer. Why won't you just fucking do redistribution of wealth from the poor to the rich? Us. And that's what this is about. You want to talk about real class warfare? Here's your class warfare. Class warfare is the rich. Class warfare is the corporations, the financial institutions, and the big banks taking the money of middle-class people and poor people. Guys, you're getting fucking hosed and you don't even realize it. You think that because these guys wear suits and ties and they're on Wall Street and they make big money that, oh, they must have earned it and they must be really putting their nose to the grindstone. No, they're not. They're the biggest welfare queens in the entire country. They want a constitutional right to free money. Could you imagine a poor black man asking for that? Could you imagine the response from the right wing? Oh, they would explode in a rage-gasm of racism and hatred. oh, black people are so lazy, they're the worst people ever. And by the way, black people would never argue for a constitutional right to free money because that's insane. That's insane. But who does have the nerve to do that? Big banks, financial institutions. When I read stuff like this, I wish I was president. The way in which I would crack down on them would make FDR look like a bitch. And FDR was hard on him. He famously said about Wall Street, I welcome their hatred. Oh, I'd be that dude on steroids and human growth hormone. Okay? They would be so scared of me. It would be glorious. Because they've been ripping you off all these years, and people don't even fucking know it. This is absolutely egregious, and this has to change. You want to talk about the real parasites and welfare queens in America? It's these guys, and they're wearing it on their sleeve.